Good morning, everybody. This is being pre-recorded on Wednesday, October 30th, to be posted on Sunday, November 3rd at around 5:30 p.m. This is supplementary content for the wrap-up that Matt and I are doing for serious issues, our wrap-up for our serious issues in the media series. I decided to do a tier list of some episodes that we have watched over the past year and a half from Friends and other TV shows that Friends actors were in that talk about serious issues. The list that we made is a cumulative list of all of the media that we've consumed that tackles various serious issues, but in honor of the 1-year anniversary of Matthew Perry's death, I decided to make a devoted tier list to Friends episodes and movies with Friends actors in them, so I can talk about some of these episodes of Friends that I liked or didn't like that talk about serious issues, and also Matthew Perry's movies. So this is like the same setup for the tier list for the other tier list that Matt and I have done for Halloween movies and fall vibes movies. So S tier is most relatable situations. So for this tier, the first episode that I wanted to talk about is Cougar Town, Season 4, Episode 14, Don't Fade on Me. As I have mentioned in other videos, Courtney Cox and her team on Cougar Town did a fantastic job with talking about Alzheimer's disease and how loved ones deal with their relative getting the disease and the steady decline. And it really brings together the relationship between Jules and her dad, Chick, which I think is really sweet throughout the whole entire series. And I'm glad that that Courtney Cox and the actor who played Chick really developed that relationship better, because in Friends, Monica's relationship with her dad, Jack, doesn't really get huge mentioning or development, which I found to be really disappointing. The next episode in this tier that I wanted to mention, I wanted to talk about grief and death, because obviously this tier list is to honor the 1-year anniversary of Matthew Perry's death, and I wanted to talk about 2 episodes of Friends that talk about death and mortality. The first episode is Season 1, Episode 8, the one where Nana dies twice, and this is the episode where Monica and Ross's grandmother dies in the hospital, wakes up, and then dies again. So, like, she has a brief... And obviously the funeral happens, and they go to the ground. They go to the gravesite service for the burial of their grandmother, and then there's this weird scene where Ross falls into an open grave, and like he says he sees his life flash before his eyes, and then in a later episode where him and Joey and Chandler are in the cop car with Gary and they get in the car crash, he also brings up like his life flashing before his eyes when he has a near-death experience in the car accident that he gets into with Chandler and Joey. But that's neither here or there related to death and grief and mortality. The other episode I wanted to mention is Season 2, Episode 3, the one where Heckles dies. And the thing that makes this episode hard for me to watch since Matthew Perry passed away is the fact that Chandler has an anxiety attack about dying alone, and post Matthew Perry dying, it's really sad to see that episode again and again, because Matthew Perry did die alone, and it makes me sad that he did. But yeah, Chandler's acting in that scene where he has an anxiety attack about dying alone after Mr. Heckles dies was very powerful. Is it relatable to me? No, but I'm mentioning it here because it's a very powerful scene that makes me cry, as does the scene at the end where they're done cleaning out the apartment of Mr. Heckles, and Chandler shuts the lights off and says, "Goodbye, Mr. Heckles," and then shuts the door behind him. The next episode I wanted to mention is season 2, episode 5, the one with 5 steaks and an eggplant. As I have mentioned in previous videos, the reason why this episode of Friends is a standout to me is because of the fact that it talks about people in friend groups not having enough money to do certain activities. And as I have mentioned in previous videos, this is relatable to Matt and I and our friends from New Hampshire and our friends from Maine, because we're always trying to figure out activities that we can do together that don't involve spending a lot of money, and that can get frustrating sometimes. The next episode I wanted to mention is Friends season 3, episode 17, the one without the ski trip. So this episode is after Ross and Rachel break up, and the reason why this episode is so relatable is because of the fact that when our friends from New Hampshire have gotten into arguments, it has caused strain in planning activities, and we have to kind of tiptoe around other people who are fighting, and that makes the events hard to plan. And that is what Joey and Chandler and Rachel and Phoebe experience in this episode when they're trying to split their time between hanging out with Ross and Rachel post their breakup. That is not my favorite episode of Friends, but it is, of course, one of the most relatable episodes. The other episode I wanted to talk about is Love Island, season 3, episode 5 of The Morning Show. The reason why we added this episode to our list is because it hits close to home, because it's about the COVID-19 pandemic and COVID lockdown, because basically in this episode of The Morning Show, UBA goes into lockdown because COVID has happened, and basically this is about everybody being in COVID isolation. And this is specifically relatable to me right now because I had COVID 2 weeks ago. So I was in isolation for 5 days while I recovered, and it was kind of lonely. I was with Matt, but I hated being isolated. And during the actual pandemic, when things were shut down and we were isolated, that's what made this episode the most relatable. A tier is not relatable, but still iconic. The first episode I wanted to mention in this tier is, of course, one of my favorite Friends episodes. Season 2, episode 11, the one with the lesbian wedding. So this episode first aired in 1996 when gay marriage was not a well-known thing yet. And, what makes this episode so iconic is the fact that there is a gay marriage in this episode between Carol and Susan. And I have always loved this episode. And it shows character growth for Ross, because he really shows up for Carol, because her dad and mom decide not to come to the wedding because they don't support Carol's marriage to Susan. So Ross takes her father's place and walks her down the aisle. And I just wanted to say that I follow Jane Sibbett, who played Carol, on Instagram, and she and her daughter Violet do a weekly chat podcast type of thing, live stream podcast, whatever it is. I still think it's a podcast, but they think it's more of a live stream. It can go here or there, but I have really enjoyed listening to them discuss certain things, especially now as the election gets closer. By the time I post this video, it will be 2 days before the election. So, oh, by the way, please get out and vote. It's very important to vote in this election so that way we can get fresh thoughts into the White House, because, like, Joe Biden was a really good president, but I think Kamala Harris will do a really good job as the president. And it would be great to have a woman president in the White House, because that has never happened. So please vote blue. Because if Donald Trump is back into the White House, that will not be a good thing. The next thing I wanted to mention about is Fools Rush In. So Fools Rush In is one of my favorite Matthew Perry movies. I just watched it a couple of nights ago because Matt and I did a whole day on Sunday where we celebrated the 1-year anniversary of Matthew Perry's death a day early. We ate 2 friends' cookbook recipes, one from the one with the last night, which was the Chinese food, which we had for dinner. We had lamb, and we had lo mein noodles and jasmine rice. And then for breakfast, we had cheesecake muffins, which was the combination of the birthday cake muffin recipe and cheesecake, because we basically made cheesecake muffins. And both of those recipes got 9 out of 10. Fools Rush In is one of my favorite movies with Matthew Perry because of his relationship dynamic between his character Alex and Selma Hayek's character Isabel. And their relationship is very cute, but in the video that Matt and I make that is going to be out earlier in the day on the 3rd of November, we're going to talk about something that we don't like about this movie that doesn't sit well with us, because Isabel, who is played by Selma Hayek, her family is Mexican, and I really like the cultural aspect of the whole Mexican family and how huge her family is. And there's a really sweet scene at the family dinner where Alex is holding a baby of one of Isabel's relatives, and I mean that scene makes me cry because it really makes me sad that Matthew Perry did not get to have any children of his own. When Alex and Isabel are on the way to her parents' house for dinner, Alex tells Isabel that he doesn't really have a close relationship with his parents. And I can see in this instance how his character is very similar to Chandler's, because in Friends, Chandler does not have a very good relationship with his parents either. So later on in the scene when his dad, who is played by his real life dad, John Bennett Perry, come in and meet Isabel for the first time, they assume she is the maid and that he's not married to Alex, because Alex never was upfront with his parents that he has met a woman and gotten married. So there's a lot of racism toward Isabel because she's Mexican, and Matt and I will discuss that in our other video. So I'm not going to get into that too much here, but I think that was handled very well. The next Matthew Perry movie I wanted to mention today is the Ron Clark Story. So this deals with abuse this is an autobiographical movie about a real teacher named Ron Clark who inspired his students in a all-black elementary school really to live up to their best potential and work really hard to get good grades and pass the state exam for New York. And it's a very powerful movie. It's one of my favorite Matthew Perry movies to watch. And one of the students in Mr. Clark's class has a very abusive dad who's an alcoholic and basically beats him up because he wants to show his artistic side and go to see the play with his classmates, The Phantom of the Opera. Like, he draws a mural on his bedroom wall of the Phantom of the Opera mask, and his dad gets mad and beats him up and kicks him out of the house. So, when his classmates notice that he's not there, Matthew Perry's character, Mr. Clark, goes to finds out that his student has been thrown out of his house and is in the alley, and he basically comforts him and tells him not to worry, that things will be okay. And that always makes me cry. That scene always makes me cry because it is one of Matthew Perry's most beautiful wall-acted scenes in any of his movies. So for B tier, there are several episodes of Friends that fit in this tier. The first one is the one where Monica and Richard are just friends. This is the one where it's been a few months since Monica and Richard have broken up, and they run into each other at the video store, and they go out on a few dates. And I think the whole plot line of that is handled very well. I have never been in an experience where I have broken up with a boyfriend and seen them again in a public setting. Because, with my first ex-boyfriend, we did theater together, so of course I would see him at rehearsals. That was awkward, but my second ex-boyfriend got kicked out of college and transferred to another school, so I never saw him again after we broke up, which was a good thing because he was a jerk. And then the other guy I dated before Matt, his name is Jesse. And, we had an amicable breakup. It's just that after I graduated from college, I never really kept in touch with him or saw him again. So I haven't really talked to him at all since I graduated. I know that he has YouTube and that he doesn't really post anything on his channel. But Jesse, if you watch this video, leave a comment below to let me know how you're doing, because I haven't talked to you in a really long time, so it would be great to hear from you. I doubt that will happen, but we'll see. The next episode in this tier is the one with the two parties. This actually should be an A tier because of the fact that the comedy in this episode is on par. It's the episode where they have to have two separate birthday parties for Rachel because her parents are getting a divorce, and there's just so much on the par comedy between all of the characters in this episode. And I would rather prefer to be at Chandler and Joey's apartment, because Monica's party just seemed to be really boring. So I didn't blame Gunther for wanting to leave Monica's party, because I would have felt the same way as he did. The next episode I wanted to talk about is the one with Barry and Mindy's wedding. So in this episode, Monica and Richard break up at Barry and Mindy's wedding because they realize they want different things in their relationship, because Monica really wants to have a baby, and Richard is obviously older than her because he's the same age as her dad, so he already has kids and grandkids, so obviously they're in different stages of life. And I mean, so I really liked Monica and Richard as a couple, and when I was younger, I pictured them getting together if Monica and Chandler didn't end up together. But now that I'm older and more wise to relationship dynamics, it's just that, sure, Monica and Richard are a cute couple, and their relationship was definitely well acted through Courtney Cox and Tom Selleck, but the age gap is so weird now, it makes me feel a little uncomfortable. The same thing with, I mean, Frank Jr. and Alice is a lot worse because that's grooming, because Alice is in her 40s and Frank Jr. is like 16. I just watched this episode actually 2 weeks ago where Frank Jr. and Alice get engaged, and Phoebe has to kind of mediate things and try to say that she feels uncomfortable with their marriage, and because of the age gap, obviously. The next episode that I wanted to talk about is... Oh, so the next movie I wanted to talk about actually is P.S. I Love You. So in this movie, Lisa Kudrow plays a friend of the main character, Holly, who is played by Hilary Swank. And Holly loses her husband, Jerry, to cancer. And he basically leaves a whole bunch of letters to her that end with P.S. I love you. And so the acting in this movie is pretty fantastic. It's pretty powerful. There's a really great scene between Holly and her mother, who is played by Kathy Bates. And they are talking about, like, how the mother handled the grief of the death of the father. And I just thought that scene was very well acted, and it's also very pretty because they're taking a walk in, I think it's Bryant Park in New York City. So it's very beautiful. So I think that serious issue is handled very well. The next movie I wanted to talk about is Scream. So for those of you who have never seen Scream, it's kind of like a campy horror movie that's not very scary, that kind of makes fun of other horror movies, because the iconic line that the villain, Ghostface, asks the people who he calls on the phone is, "What's your favorite scary movie?" So this movie also deals with grief because Sidney Prescott, who is played by Neve Campbell, it has been 1 year since her mother passed away, and the newscaster, Gail Weathers, who's played by Courtney Cox, is really trying to get a story on the Ghostface killer, and also, like, make book sales for her book about the death of Sydney's mother, because, like, basically, like, people in the community think that she's kind of a slut and that she cheated on her dad with somebody else. So this handles grief really well, because obviously Sydney is still mourning the loss of her mom a year later, and her boyfriend Billy is sort of a jerk, and he comes off as not supportive, and then you find out later that he's Ghostface. Like, that whole thing is kind of spoiled at the beginning, because the principal calls Billy and his friend Stu to his office, like, within the first half hour of the movie, to say, if you guys don't cut this bullshit out, I'm going to expel you. Obviously, if they had gotten expelled, there would be no plot for the movie. But it is revealed. Sorry for the spoiler if you guys have never seen Scream. I'm assuming that most of you guys have seen it, but if you haven't, the spoiler is that Billy is Ghostface, and he is playing these pranks because he's really pissed off because Sydney's mother cheated on his Sydney's mother and Billy's father ended up being in a relationship where they were cheating on each other's spouses. And that's what led to his parents divorcing. So I guess you could say he deals with his own grief by committing these murders because he doesn't think his parents deserve to break up, and that Sydney's mother was kind of a whore by cheating on her husband with his father. So yeah, Billy is obviously the villain of the first Scream movie. And I love the role reversal of Courtney Cox's character because she obviously comes off as very mean and very rude in this movie in the beginning. But then she like turns around in the beginning. I mean, she turns around by the end, and in a twist, she basically says, "I'm gonna kill you bastards because you guys are idiots," when Stu and Billy are in Sydney's house threatening to kill her dad. So as far as watching the rest of the Scream movies, I don't know if I want to watch them or not because I have been reading the plot synopses on IMDb of all of the other Scream movies, and basically the whole Ghostface villain thing seems to get really, really repetitive. So Scream 7 is coming out in 2026, and I hope the theme for that movie is Sydney going to therapy for post-traumatic stress because she has been dealing with this Ghostface killer for like 20 years. I don't know what the plot of the actual movie is, or if I'm going to see it, or if I'm going to watch the rest of this series, because I just found the ending of the first movie to be kind of underwhelming, and the only reason why I would want to see the rest of the movies, is so there's a little bit of a relationship buildup between Tatum's sister. Tatum is the best friend of Sidney Prescott, who is played by Drew Barrymore, and then you see a little bit of chemistry between Dewey, who is the brother of Tatum, who is played by Courtney Cox's real-life ex-husband, David Arquette, and Gail. So the only reason I would want to see the rest of the Scream movies is mostly for the build-up between Dewey and Gail to see if they, like, get married or anything. But, like, I'm not really that intrigued by the whole Ghostface plot and how repetitive that gets based on seeing the plot synopses of the other movies in the series. So for C tiers, season 2, episode 10, the one with Russ. So I have talked about this episode to death about how I do not like how Fun Bobby's substance use disorder is handled in this episode. It just makes me so mad because Monica should have been more supportive of her boyfriend when he was trying to get sober instead of drinking to deal with how boring his conversations were. So if I were to rewrite that episode or something, what I would have done is maybe had Monica go to therapy with Fun Bobby to see how he can best work through the whole thing with his substance use disorder. On the topic of substance use disorder, we're going to talk about Cougar Town next, and as I mentioned in my series, and as I mentioned on the video on Matt's channel where we discussed series issues as they pertain to Cougar Town specifically, we discussed how poorly substance use disorder is handled because basically in every scene when Jules and her friends are together in their kitchen, they're drinking wine. No matter what time of day it is, they're always drinking wine. And at the beginning of season 4, episode 1, Blue Sunday, the 21-year-old son, Travis, calls out his parents and their friends about how much they drink and how they should go to AA. I feel like that should have really happened after that episode. Like, I don't know how they would have been able to fit it in, but I just feel like that should have been a plot. The next show I wanted to mention is Episodes. So Episodes is the show that was on Showtime in 2007 that has Matt LeBlanc playing himself, and there's a lot of good throwbacks to Friends in here, and James Michael Tyler guest stars in an episode, which I haven't seen yet, but can't wait to watch. So the reason why I ranked this show in C tier is because there is a plot line in one episode where Matt LeBlanc's character, who, as I just said, Matt LeBlanc plays himself in his show, so he sleeps with his TV show producer for the show Pucks. Her name is Beverly, and this basically ruins the marriage between Adam, who is the male director, who is best friends with Matthew, and his wife. It leads to them divorcing, basically. And yeah, I mean, I just hated that whole plot. I thought they could have really done without a cheating plot to destroy the relationship of the two TV producers. So I don't know where the producers of that show are coming from with that plot line. And the last movie I wanted to mention is Numb. This is Matthew Perry's movie that he came out with the year after the Ron Clark story. So this came out in 2007, and it's about a guy named Hudson Milbank who's a playwright, and he deals with a lot of anxiety and depersonalization disorder, which is an offset diagnosis for his anxiety. The reason why this movie is in C tier is because after reading Matthew Perry's book, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, and finding out how he died, which was in his hot tub, I just feel like, yes, his acting in the movie was very good. Hudson Milbank is one of my most relatable characters in his movies because he's a writer. But the thing that brings this movie down to C, which is mediocre in my opinion, is because of how close it hits to home. Like, there's an opening scene where he's in the bathtub, and I almost didn't want to watch the rest of the movie because it gave me anxiety, because I know that he died in his hot tub and he was alone. And I actually learned a lot about depersonalization when I was watching this movie, because I never knew what it was until So basically what depersonalization is it's a subset of anxiety where the person who has anxiety has out-of-body experiences and doesn't really connect well to what's going on in real life. So, like, there's one scene where I think he's dealing with his depersonalization by having, like, sex with his therapist, which is actually not professional. But I think maybe he does that mostly because he's lonely and he doesn't have a relationship. And I don't know if Matthew Perry actually dealt with depersonalization in his real life because of his anxiety or not, because that was never mentioned in his book. But I just thought that was a really interesting thing to discuss in one of his films. So thank you for tuning in. My next two videos will be out on Thursday, and I will be talking about I will be reshooting my video for the Halloween book tier ranking list, because since I originally posted that on October 17th, has been updated as I have finished many more Halloween related books that I want to rank. And then the next video is going to be my tier ranking, my tri-monthly reading wrap up, where I give books that I read superlatives for books that I have read through August through October. So stay tuned for those videos. They will be out for you next Thursday at noon and 2 p.m. Have a great day.